I would like to thank you for the renewed invitation and the confidence you've shown towards my interest on the interlinked path of philosophy and psychoanalysis. Tonight, I would like to address the motives or scenes of conversion. It's a power concept that bears enormous consequences but may not have been tracked the way I would like to try to do it so tonight. Let us explore the modalities of conversion, first by looking at change, or the very possibility of change. Let me get first very basic with this question. Can human being change? Can humankind change by itself? Or is it necessary that it comes under the pressure of a catastrophic event, an ecological blast, a war, a trauma, whether it is individual or collective? This will be my question today. I choose the word conversion because it is less used and because it embodies a movement of transformation that goes from the same to the different. Etymologically, in Latin, it comes from convertere, turning with and towards an aim. In other words, from sameness, something occurs that turns the same into another, a different state of being. The word conversion is probably less commonly used in English than it is in French or Spanish, because it comes from a tradition both Christian and Neoplatonic. I realize that the task of extracting it from the religious background that infuses it so often is not easy. This deconstructive device seems to me important because conversion borders such notions as mutation, transformation, revelation, revolution. In this time of collective anxiety, we are witnessing in live and at high-speed velocity mutations on and in the planet that are not only natural, affecting the world we know or knew, but in the realm of consciousness and science as well. It also puts pressure on the question of perversion in today's language usage. The fact is, we grow tired of words, and they may be of us. They are used up by our use of them. They are so ripped off that one cannot distinguish anymore the unknown part of it, the underlying bewilderment. And I don't speak only of such concepts as time, space, being. I also speak of much lesser worked on words that seem to have escaped the formatting the great concepts have been taken on. The use of notions that haven't been used up yet is one of Avital's great skill, who throughout the scope of her studies of stupidity, drive, contamination, makes us hear a new, very timeless questions of philosophy. So one could describe conversion as an ascendant move, for it immediately implies an aim towards a spiritual higher state, and a turning move, spiral-like. It is Baroque in a way, and architecture as a riddle, since in a very Deleuzian way, it harbors both a shelter and an aim. The shelter is where we come from. The aim is probably what impels revolution. The possibility of conversion, philosophically speaking, drives us to this haunting question: what is the relation between fate and freedom for a subject? Is existence meant to be a passage from a state to another, or a stage to another, as Kierkegaard would name it? Or is it a vision we inherit from the shadows of the post-Nietzschean's death of God, and that we try, in a desperate move, to save a meaning, to displace in a blunt materialistic culture where the only means of conversion are gambling on the distorted power given by science? So why, in other terms, should one escape the trauma or the social games one is bound to by one's own history, both big and little h? birth, accidents of life, to signify oneself as a seeker and a free conductor of one's life. And what is a human being ready to lose for this? For there is some loss at stake. And is there such a thing as a place for the subject where a revelation versus revolution can be obtained, contained, transmissible? What is the relation all this implies to truth, to initiation, to the avoidance of disaster? Answering a student's question, Alain Badiou, the other day, made us think over the fact that 20th century was the one who had sheltered the belief of the infinite power of the subject, so that the passion of radical change drove necessarily towards the delusionary use of violence and destruction. So should we not take another turn to bear the responsibility for the divided or haunted subject, compels us to invent something that will not bring Bolshevism into, let's say, ecological wars? For we are inheritors, embedded in these questions. I quote Marx, "Men make their own history, but not of their own free will, not under circumstances they themselves have chosen, but under the given and inherited circumstances with which they are directly confronted. The tradition of the dead generation weighs like a nightmare on the minds of the living. And just when they appear to be engaged in the revolutionary transformation of themselves and their material surroundings, in the creation of something that does not yet exist, precisely in such epochs of revolutionary crisis, they timidly conjure up the spirits of the past to help them." Thus, how can we think through both our faithfulness and unfaithfulness to the past, without ignoring or denying it, and think the coming times without projecting our past fears? Is changing part of an ethical task? Is transformation a process that needs an inner conversion in order to not let the death drive take the better part for us? Can we change singularly or collectively without thinking that it is always a forgotten trauma that is calling to be delivered from its silenced past? Why should one change one's life if it isn't for a greater truth? Is there something like a direct access to truth? Conversion has been described often in terms of insights. We remember St. Paul's fall on his way to Damascus, or Sils Maria revelation striking Nietzsche, or Pascal's night of fire, or even Descartes' 3 dreams related by his friend Bailey, leading each of them to believe that they had experienced an embodiment of truth. One of the major texts of conversion, though, in philosophy is probably Plato's Inside Cave. And it is not only about turning away from the projected images given as reality and seeking the true light, but about going back. It is the political turn of one's responsibility that Plato emphasizes on and that we should not forget, consisting in asking what is the price one is willing to pay for being responsible to this freedom that truth brings to the prisoner. This is why a witness is needed, because a witness, aside from his experience, is the one who offers testimony that something radical has changed, a vertical time crossing a horizontal one, opening the possibility of a true event. So there is much at risk in a conversion process. Not only solitude is isolation, but maybe even death. There is no path, no given wisdom, no answer, no cartography here. But there might be a possible awareness that for the philosopher, not so much as the lover of wisdom, but the one who will try to go with courage beyond the perversions of the language that powers deal with. If I say perversion, it's because narcissistic perversion today is very fashionable. Manipulation skills is a win-win game today. The narcissistic shield is most welcomed. And this wouldn't be so problematic if only the pervert, whether it's an institution or a person, didn't need the other to be fooled and abused for him to continue to master the game, and a game that cannot admit witness. Today we experience a fragmentation of knowledge in all areas of life, resulting in man splitting his anonymation, his atomization. The dictate of utility, of efficiency is valid, no longer solely in the economic realm, but also in private life, since science and biotechnology offers us dream versus nightmares that 2 decades ago were still unthinkable of. Yet nostalgia is a fault of the spirit, said Montaigne. And as you may know, nostalgia was the first described neurosis in the 19th century. Our time is under the spell of risk, but in a strange, compulsive, phobic way. On the one hand, our society tries to attain the zero risk level, with insurance policies and a security playing the role of a high moral value required by us all. From ecological catastrophe to the dangers of financial breakdowns, to the slow and patient building of evaluation at every step of individual careers, this economy trying to conjure the chance of failures and secure our path. It's turning it the exact opposite of what it was meant for. Because the short-term economy of avoiding all risks cannot bear the vision, the heights, the width, the wideness that we would need of global concern. I shall return to the beginning, where we can grab the question of risk, both semantically and philosophically, in relation to conversion. That is, the only thing we can only and radically risk is our life. The expression risquer sa vie is even stronger in French, I guess, than it is in English. What does risking our life mean? Is it a mere image? A gesture that asks a survival kit from us? An ultimate test? What has it to do with the process of conversion? As a newborn infant, we have been part of another being. Otherness is not only what we come from, cells assembling, but what we have to learn to lose with the acceptance of existential solitude. Birth because it is a restricted area from a memory. Death because when it comes we are no longer there as an aware subject, are the major events of our life. Both are conversions. In that sense, they are traumas which compel us to take an account of and be explored, such as in history the unsaid and unrepresentable collective traumas will raise as specters until we turn to take responsibility to dig out the secrets, the silent voices, and the forbidden truth. Is the question of truth that beholds us there and that we can't avoid? We can only hope that the double-spinning movement of conversion transformation will land us near the traumas of the past while inventing a new space, a new frame, where this past can be metabolized. We can also oppose this vision with the more pessimistic and sharp-edged reflection of Derrida, reminding us in The Beast and the Sovereign, I quote, that neither animal or different species, nor men of different cultures, nor individual, animal, or human inhabit the same world as another. However close and similar these living individuals may be. Between my world, the world, what I call my world, and there is no other for me, every other world making up part of it, between my world and every other world. There is initially the space and time of an infinite difference, of an interruption incommensurable with all the attempts at passage, of bridge, of isthmus, of communication, of trope, and of transference with the desire for a world, and the sickness of the world, mal du monde, The being in sickness of the world will attempt to pose, to impose, to propose, to stabilize. There is no world, there are only islands. Conversion speaks about limits, thresholds, islands, and transgressions. Here we meet figures that are driven by passion or a spell of innocence, and who, from Kafka to Dostoevsky, Flaubert, or Nietzsche, are untamable even by philosophy. Prince Mnouchkin's innocent, his idiocy, Bartleby's strange negation, or Billy Budd's impossible guilt are figures of conversion not containing any wisdom or even proposing an ethical position within the realm of their difference. This is also where the clown, the buffoon, and the trickster have their place. Constructively anarchic world figure in a stage of culture, whether it is Hermès or Alfred Jarry's Uburois, the trickster of Amerindian culture, the clown in Greek mythology or in Commedia dell'arte, all the way up to Nietzsche's buffoon and Shakespeare's jester. He calls for a human world by stumbling and getting up again, by evincing greatness in falling. Like the characters of Samuel Beckett's play, witness of the grotesque and mute, absurd world, smiling and warning at the same time, the clown becomes a speculum mirroring humankind struggled with itself. Part of the wholeness of archaic life is the disorder harbored with every trickster. Within the preset limits of the permissible, he makes it possible to experience the impermissible, which holds an immense life force. This is also where comes in the innocent. For Dostoevsky's Prince Mnouchkin or Melville's Billy Budd might not be able to sustain subjectivity in the sense that we usually define it, as character actively willing his life. If the buffoon or the jester can take the risk to reveal that the emperor is naked, or to say to Lear that he enacted his spiritual death by not admitting that his daughter Cordelia was the only one who loved him, it is because they are acting out as bodies of truth that is taken for madness, which makes them also healers in a way, because they know where a body is taken over, when a body is taken over by sickness, seen here as Lacan saw the symptom, that is the place where strictly you lie to yourself to such an extent that major disorders will ensue. The innocent person is different. He or she acts a revelation for the other's conversion without willing it, by his mere presence. He himself can't change, as he can't enter the frame of the social game and values, but as such he precipitates a truth effect. The Prince Mnouchkins make Natalia Filipovna collapse inwardly, because without wanting it, he is giving her access to a non-subjective presence of what's the real. In Dostoevsky's bewildering short story, The Master and the Slave, and his slave are taken one night in a snowstorm in the forest, and the master will experience a conversion of his previous total narcissistic life, ending up sacrificing himself by covering his slave's body so that he doesn't die of cold. The innocent one here didn't ask for anything, but his mere presence made the world, as the jester enacts, upside down. Conversion is said to possess the soul of the person who is seized by it and who is not able to come back to his former life. So a conversion theory is a way of including the interrogator in the method itself, such as Descartes and Freud or Nietzsche have shown us the way, like entering the hub in surfing, knowing that the figures you are going to explore are mainly figures of discourses, even when you know that we are in history in a broad and profound time of mutation. Philosophy is obsessed with the traversal that no shore will assuage, no work will achieve. The light promised to the prisoners of the cave will dazzle those who free themselves from their chain to reach it. They will go back to contemplate the film projected on the wall in the guise of reality, because illusion is a stronger passion than truth, as we all know. The violence of truth does not tolerate shade. I have dwelled during these days of seminar on the Kant and Constant controversy on truth and lying, as I did yesterday, in fact, today, because the question of truth is unavoidable for the theme of conversion, whether it has been grounded religiously or not. Kant thought that it was imperative to tell the truth. To do otherwise, he considered, is a violation of the categorical imperative, since one could not will lying to be a universal law. Objectively, a universal law cannot permit any exception, else a contradiction ensues. In response to Kant's ethical theory, Benjamin Constant published an article in a periodical in which he stated that was 5 years after the French Revolution. It's important in the background. He stated that the moral principle stating that it is a duty to tell the truth would make any society impossible if that principle were taken singly and unconditionally. A debate happened. Kant's response to Constant could be found in his essay on a supposed right to lie because of philanthropic concern. In this essay, he clearly states his position. Truthfulness in statements that cannot be avoided is the formal duty of man to everyone, however great the disadvantage that may arise therefrom from him or for another. Kant felt so strongly about this position that he backed it even in the face of Constant's extreme example, which is, if someone were at your door to murder your friend who was hiding in your house, and if asked if he was there, what would you do? Kant answered that you still had a duty to tell the truth. Constant claimed contrary to this, that while, I quote, to tell the truth is thus a duty, but it is a duty only with regard to one who has a right to the truth. But no one has a right to truth that harms others. Kant tells us that, I quote, the expression to have a right to truth is meaningless. One must say rather that man has a right to his own truthfulness, veracitas, that is, to subjective truth in his own person. For to have objectively a right to truth would be the same as to say that it is a matter of one's will whether a given statement is to be true or false. And Kant adds, man, as a moral being, is under obligation to himself, to truthfulness. The point we could make here is that by external lie, a human being makes himself an object of contempt in the eye of others. By internal lie, he does what is still worse, according to Kant. He makes himself contemptible in his own eyes and violates the dignity of his own person. Within the borders of conversion towards truth, there is the ethical statement of the universal in the self. As Goodman writes in his book Profanation, the universal part in the subject, the divination of the person, the principle that expresses his entire existence, is regarded as his genius, going back to the Latin tradition. Indulgence, genia, expresses in Latin the secret relationship each person must maintain with his own genius. But it's not so easy to let one's genius speak out loud, much less to shelter it. Could the expression of this genius may be a way to convert the passion of the soul into a dispossession that gives access to the real? In a very famous text, Garcia Lorca writes about the duende. I quote, "The duende is a force, not a labor, a struggle, not a thought. This mysterious force that everyone feels and no philosopher has explained is in sum the spirit of the earth, the same duende that scorched Nietzsche's heart as he had searched for its outer form on the Rialto Bridge and in Bizet's music, without finding it, and without seeing that the duende he pursued had leaped from the Greek mysteries to the dancers of Cadix. So then, I don't want anyone to confuse the duende with the theological demon of doubt, nor the Catholic devil destructive and of low intelligence who disguised himself as a bitch to enter convents. No, the duende, I mean, secret and shuddering, is a descendant of that blithe demon, all marble and salt, of Socrates, whom it scratches at indignantly on the way when he drank the hemlock, and that other melancholy demon of Descartes. For every man, every artist, called Nietzsche or Cézanne, every step that he climbs in the tower of his perfection is at the expense of the struggle that he undergoes with his duende, not with an angel, as it is often said, nor with his muse. The true struggle is with the duende. Well, this non-philosophical or nor psychoanalytical text is probably, to my mind, the best approach to this moment when in creation, in life, a soul meets with an emotion, a greater truth which you cannot go back from. Conversion needs a place like hospitality to bear the testimony of where you come from and what or where you turn to or abide with. Is conversion what is aimed at in psychoanalytical cure? If we think of psychoanalysis more as an act than as a body of knowledge, then interpretation operates in the same space to which creation belongs, in the sense of overcoming dread and being able to sustain the unexpected. Aiming towards a self-revolution, the cure brings us back to this archaic moment of the untamed. If we don't confront ourselves as analysts with this experience in the way a dream is looked at, for instance, how can we gain the capacity to judge or have an insight about our own ego defenses and possible breakthroughs? An analysis is an art of not touching. I do realize this can sound provocative, but it's not. Touching is the living experience of the world transmitted through the diffraction of drives, always partial. Psychoanalysis is an art of touching the soul while not touching the flesh, and it experiences what is lived again, relived, revealed, in a language that, for its part, allows us to experience what is untouchable in the other. That other who can be explored, restrained, enveloped, consoled, hurt, unveils in the rawest and most exposed intimacy the fact that some part will escape not only desire, but that there is something untouchable in the body itself. Spinoza's genius lay here. Transcendence is in the most intimate proximity to the self, and you don't know it. No one knows what a body can do, he wrote. The body is exact resonance, its matter, its history is located on the blank spot of desire, of speech, of thought. If psychoanalysis is an art of not touching, it may well be because it questions the very point of conversion, the place where touching curves into dread at an age you can't remember, where the ego arises from first attachment, detachment, identification. A psychoanalytical cure is an art of bringing through anamnesis the calling back of an unknown body lying far beneath our usual one. Through words and their significance surface their imbrication, their meticulous construction, their silence. A touch other than that of the skin, comparable to a musician's touch, like we heard yesterday, that is, a touch that sets up a precise virtuosic resonance in which the world is engaged in the transfer. Psychoanalysis experiences itself as a philosophical aporia, because the psychoanalyst demands adherence to the setting of the cure, a more strict obedience, but consented to by both, yet has no answer to provide. But this implies the admission that we cannot be completely subjective, that the subject, the self, is only a part of the construction of our identity. An analysis as an act is the opposite of the passage à l'acte, the realization in actuality of a fantasy. An act of analysis demands the enacted possibility of suspension. Suspension is a place where the maximum of attention to what is simply there is summoned. What is offered then is merely the presence of things. The supreme test in the equilibrium conquered in the void. Any moment it can be broken. Suspension is not about suspended time, awaiting some decision. It's the event itself. To suspend judgment from ancient Greek to Descartes is the meaning and place of epoche, of philosophy itself. It has little to do with the inhibition of action, but entails the circling of time around the event, eliciting its own examination. To stay suspended and choose not to decide, not even to judge, is to maintain for as long as you can this impossible figure that commands you inwardly to be in reserve. It's not about waiting, nor is it is a matter of deferring by fear or indecision. It's already the event itself in its non-effective action. The suspicion goes as far as making us doubt, even of our identity in Descartes' meditation. Doubt is suspension's bad friend, its secret messenger. The doubting subject takes the right to not believe what he sees, to examine even that about which he doubts about, to circle round the enemy's territory. If doubts is the realization of thought itself, and not only a yard sale to decide what is left to keep or not, then we should discover and mark a way of being in suspension even stronger than all belief. Putting an end to the belief that the subject will find herself or himself and will regain himself in an immediate decision is the dangerous path of analysis. We touch here upon the myths we built, upon the roots of politics. The regathering of the subject in action is a fiction, but a nice one. We would like so much to recognize ourselves in our actions, our judgments, our assertions. In the end, it's the other way around. It's metaphor, the uncertain and blurred image that describes us best. To stay suspended in half darkness, in the dim light, in a relative blindness, and somehow to stick to it. Such is the path of anamnesis, whether it's psychoanalytic or philosophical. For in this space of essential obscurity, something else might appear, another limit, another shore. At the very outset, psychoanalysis is a conversion journey having to do with the other, l'autre with a capital A, as Lacan would say. Freud did not invent that journey. He followed the footsteps of Socrates, Epictet, Augustine, Duns Scotus, Maimonides, Spinoza. But the philosopher was the first to sound the depth of the human soul by not taking literally, as it were, the mystification with which, through words, it's like to surround itself. This violent therapy has an inventor, Socrates. It was with words and against them that he sought out the dwelling place of truth, a different truth from the one which we are pinned down by the illusion of meaning and consciousness, that is, of belief. In short, the entire panoply used by the ego to shore up its power. The possibility of conversion, to end, to resume, and that is of creation as such, as it may arise from the exploration of the self, is another name for the kairos, for that event of a pure present, of a pure presence, which takes place only and does not begin again, whose very pleasure lies in not ceasing to want to begin again, in being the repetition of the same gesture, the same ritual, the same minuscule words lodged in that place of desire where they encounter terror and surmount it, every time imperceptibly. The other name for the kairos is that precise moment when desire ceases to be desires and comes undone as it becomes embodied. And in this intimate struggle between madness and thought that makes creation possible, dread is overcome. But it wins in secret. It takes refuges in folded papers, twisted words, dream, stammering emanating from the memory of the dead. It is a childhood language that suddenly reappears. When in that wild language of madness, or in the childhood language of some of our terrors, or even in the so-called foolishness of certain everyday words, we recognize an inner truth that will make its own way in us. When we welcome it, we let it traverse us while we whisper its name, and it passes and take care. And if we take care not to frighten it, then perhaps we are breaking through the primitive dread in a way that allows us a new kind of freedom. Perhaps we are allowing the possibility of alteration, of otherness to inhabit us, at least for a moment. But it might raise also the question of sacredness, if I can dare to put it that way, to overcome once again the primitive dread of the traumatic, whether individual or collective the denial is to be confronted to the horror and in a certain way to the sacred. Maybe all conversion move is an answer to this trauma, calling for an invention that will move us beyond the lost world where we think we belong. The pairing of horror and the sacred has structured the West ever since language and writing constituted in our imaginary and the root of all experience. It is the West's secret architecture, its spider-like ramification and links stretch as far as what can read them. The sacred horror duo is a relation to the limits that institutes secular space as a space that human can grasp, in which they can question and grow, while before them, like the shadows they carry with them, stands the immense store of horrors and sacrifices from with mid-spring. And here also are the territories of the clown, the trickster, and the innocent, and consequently of every human act. If philosophy is not the key to Bluebird's seven door, it at least opens up a little skylight in the chambers of horrors.